Okay, the stream's back up. After that pretty much interview or introduction that stands on its own, Eric Addison is the guy behind 100 ACRE Films. Depending on the day, he's a director, producer, cinematographer, and/or editor. He's a proud graduate of the SDSU film program.
Aztecs.
Go. Winner of some Telly Awards, Emmy nominated, and future Oscar contender.
It could
definitely.
happen.
His usual projects include corporate spots, promos, commercials, and the occasional short film. He's also the manager of SD Premiere Pro user group, which makes sense because he's been using it since the late 90s. Well-versed in cinema, writings of Ernest Hemingway, and early 80s video games. Ladies and gentlemen, Eric Addison.
Thank you. All right, is my mic on? Can you guys hear me okay? I wanted to say one quick thing before I get started. So when I was in film school, my senior film, we got to screen it. It got accepted into like this sort of special screening we had at SDSU, and it showed at the Ken Cinema. And I will never forget, the film was about, it's kind of a sci-fi film. There was a moment where there's like an area of this people's house that is kind of like frozen in time. And there's this moment where the girlfriend comes over, doesn't believe her boyfriend, throws a baseball, and the baseball freezes. And the look on her face is she's kind of realizing, oh my gosh, this is totally true. And I remember during the screening, when that happened, in the audience, there was like this little chuckle and kind of like, oh yeah, like, you know, the audience was with, you know, the girlfriend's face was on the screen like disbelieving, and the audience was like, yep, see, you're right. And I remember sitting in the audience feeling, this is awesome. I have them. They are enraptured in my story. And playing this video back, I heard a couple awws. Those, when if you, as a filmmaker and as an editor, when you get that, it's like, I'm doing my job. That's why I do this, because it's telling that story and reaching that emotional moment where somebody in that audience is going, oh, or crying, you know. That's like hitting the lottery is when they cry. Hopefully because they're so touched by it, not because this is so bad, we paid you for this. I want to thank you all for having me, and Robin for inviting me. Yes, my name is Eric Addison. I run 100 ACRE Films. I also run the Premiere Pro user group, do a lot of stuff in town. One thing I want to talk about today, or the thing I'm going to talk about today is I do a lot of corporate video. Corporate video can be pretty boring. It can be meetings. It can be just stuff that you will just like, why am I wasting my life doing this? It can also be a lot of fun. It can also be challenging. You know, I'm lucky in that I'm getting to do some really cool projects like this one right now, where these are essentially little mini docs, is what I like to call them, for one company in town, where we're telling stories. If you noticed in that video, you never heard the name of a company. There was, I mean, we talked about a product, but there was never any mention of a company name, and that was by design. One of the things I kind of want to preface this is about being an editor. It is, following Mike Tao is kind of a hard thing. Mike Tao is one of the best editors in town. And Mike is an editor, okay? When I went to film school, I didn't plan on being an editor. I wanted to direct and write. And to this day, that's still what I want to do. But I found I was able to edit to make a living. And I'm kind of, as I'm growing, doing more editing, I'm finding out what kind of editor I am. And I guess I kind of want to start this talk by saying to all of you who want to edit, you kind of, to me, and I could be way off on this, and if you want to argue with me about it, that's fine afterwards. I always love a good debate. Just ask Tony Tao. But I think editors sort of, you should always be, as an artist, you should always be pushing yourself to try new things. But as an editor, you kind of have a thing that you're good at. And for me, this kind of storytelling, I think, is where I'm good. It's where I feel the most comfortable. Some editors do this really flashy stuff, the hot, sexy, sizzle stuff with stuff flying all over the place and weird transitions and all this other kind of stuff. I can't do that. And I've tried, and I failed miserably. And I pay people to do stuff like that are much better at it than I am. And so I say all that to say that, you know, wherever you are as an editor, wherever you find your sweet spot, always try to push yourself. Try to find new things to do, projects to challenge yourself in your storytelling. But don't beat yourself up if you're not doing things like what the other guys are doing. You know, if you can't do that, find what you're good at and go that direction and go at it full steam. You know, I've just sort of come to that conclusion about where I am as an editor, and I look for projects where I can, do that. So that's just sort of a little editor advice to you all. So take it for what it's worth. So today we are going to talk about the video we just saw, and I am going to talk about the workflow that we use to create a video like that. I'm not going to talk a lot of tech about features that Premiere has. I'm assuming a lot of you know Premiere. How many people use Premiere every day? Okay, good. So for those of you who don't know Premiere, third Wednesdays every month, Premiere Pro User Group. If you find us on Facebook, you should come out and you'll learn all about Premiere that way. I'm really going to focus more about how we put this together and the craft of editing and what we did. So first things, let's start at the beginning. So client called us, said they wanted to do this project. It required going to Utah, sending a crew there to do the shoot. It was a 2-day shoot. We shot with a Canon C200. Everything was 4K. Everything was Canon RAW. The shoot went really well. It was a very small crew by design. When we're talking about shooting with a child with Down syndrome and going into their home, you do not want to bring Hollywood there. You want to keep it as small and nimble as possible. So it was one camera, couple lights, one sound guy, and a PA. And I think we did have makeup for the interviews. So shoot went well. Everything comes back to me. One thing that I am big on, and if you come to these user groups, you've heard me talk about this many, many times, organization. While Premiere does have some of the cool metadata features that Mr. Tao was talking about in Final Cut, it's not quite built around the metadata that has it, so it doesn't have some of those other features. But we go old school with bins. I like bins. I use bins in film school. They work. So, so what I would say is come up with a system and use it day in, day out. I like to think that I have a system in place so that if, God forbid, I were to die tomorrow and my wife, Jill, started getting phone calls from my clients wanting to know where the projects were, she could call Mr. Tao, she could call Mr. Brueggemeyer, or any number of other people in here that I'm friends with. They could come into my office, boot up my computer, and after looking at 2 projects, I got this Addison guy figured out. And they could take over and finish those projects because I do pretty much the same thing every single time. And that is a good system to have. So it starts by just creating bins and putting everything in the bins. You can see I've got a B-roll bin here. Within that bin I have, let's go full screen on this. So I've got a day 1, the day 1 audio files, day 2, and doctor's office. Now, I could break this down even more, and sometimes I do. For instance, in day 1 we did some shots with the Ronin, so I have those separated out. But because everything was shot within the same area, I didn't feel I needed to break it out. Everything on day 1 was pretty much shot in the home of the family. So, and normally I would be looking at things like this, so I can see what's here and kind of scrub through and look at the shots. I'm used to working with 2 monitors, so having 1 monitor is a little wonky for me now. Say what now? Were you on set? I was not on set, so I couldn't travel for this one. So we did lots of meetings with the client. The shooter, it was Chris Francis, who I've worked with a number of times, and so we had lots of meetings, talked about style, talked about look, and everything. So he knew what to get. So anyway, so we get everything sort of organized. You can see I've got a bin here for interviews. So these are the interview clips. I have a motion graphic template here, folder. I have all the music tracks. I have a folder for pictures. Previous sequences. Previous sequences are where all of the older edits live, and some of the B-roll timelines that I'll talk about in a second. But when I'm editing, just a word to the wise, never just work off one sequence the entire time. You can see here I've got edit 2, here's edit 1, edit 1A, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 5 is actually the final edit that we did. When I'm ready to move on from an edit, I will right-click, I will choose duplicate, and I will duplicate that sequence and then rename it the next edit and then start going. Reason you do that is because at some point in your career, some client is going to say, when you're 9 versions in, remember what we did in edit 3, that sequence? Can we put that back in? And it's super easy just to go back to edit 3, cut it out, drop it in, and boom, you're off to the races and running. So keeping the extra sequences takes up no space. So just do that. One alternate way that a lot of editors like to work is every day they create a new project file. That's another way to go. I don't do that because then you end up with like a whole boatload of project files, and I always want to just see one project file when I open it up. But some editors like to work that way. Just find what works for you and go with that. The other thing too I'll talk about is, as you can see, we have different timelines for things. So for instance, I'll create a timeline of this day 1 B-roll. And if we open that up, you can see this is all of the B-roll from day 1. It's all sunk up. You can see it's all just stuff at the house. And so that's why I kind of just kept it all together. But I like having it like this because I can easily kind of scrub through and find clips. If I wanted to go through and metadata tag things, I could do that and then just search for things. But I'm much more visual. It's just the way that I'm wired. And so being able to just kind of scrub through the timeline, I usually know where the clips are, and so I can easily find things that way. One thing I'll interject here too, since we're talking about B-roll, is as an editor, if you're not going through your B-roll, you're doing your project a great disservice. And what I mean by that is, if you're not there on the shoot, as I wasn't here for this, when you get back to your edit bay and you start sitting down and you've got your script, first thing you want to do is go through and watch every frame of B-roll that you have and make notes about what you have. Because at some point when you're working, you're going to think, oh yeah, there's this shot somewhere in here that I could find, and you can go grab it and drop it in, and it's perfect. If you don't do that, you never know the little moments that you're missing that are in there, since you weren't there for the day of the shoot or you didn't shoot it, if you're just editing it. So I can't emphasize that enough. Take the time. If you're, when you're sitting down to budget your project, add in 2, 3, 4 hours, depending on how much footage you're going to get, just to sit and watch and take notes. You will thank yourself later. So we create B-rolls footage for each day. I also do the same thing for the interviews. So if we come back to the interview folder here, let me switch over back to this view. Interviews. So I have an interview footage that is all the doctor, one that is all the mom, and one that is all the dad, which is right here. And so what I do is I just lay them all out, I sync them all up. And part of the reason that I do it this way, is separating them all out, is because for these projects, what we do is create transcripts. And we send transcripts off to, or we send the clips off, get transcripts made, send the transcripts to the client, who will then craft a script. So I'm not actually script writing here, I'm getting the script from the client. Now they consult me about it, we talk about it. We did a few meetings about this where we talked about the structure and what we were going to do. But once I give them the transcripts, they then go through all the answers and the sound bites and then put together a script. And I can show you kind of what the script looks like here. This is probably a later draft. Word. So you can see here we've got the script, it's got video, it's got lower third information, some B-roll suggestions or things like that, and then just straight out just just the sound bites put together. So once I get that back, we get that script back, the first thing that I do is put together a rough assembly, or as some people like to call it, a radio cut. And what the radio cut is just those sound bites from the script strung out together. So you can watch it here. I don't know why there's no audio, but there's no audio. Yeah, that should be working. But anyway, she would be saying things, blah, 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 blah. And you can see there's jump cuts here. Not worried about that at all. This is purely for content. It's purely for the client to look at it and say, does this flow? Does this tell the story that we want to tell? And then based on this, and you can see this cut is around 5 minutes, 28 seconds. I think our finished video was about 4:30. So we cut about a minute out of this. But yeah, and sometimes we go through 2 or 3 versions of this, where it's just hearing those sound bites, and we'll, does this have the emotional impact we want? Can we kind of, we can see it in our heads, where we're going with this. And so this just sort of helps us before I waste time putting in B-roll and and all that. Let's just get what I like to call the narrative spine of the story put together. And so that's what this version is. And then, one thing I want to talk about too about transcripts, for those of you who decide to do transcripts at some point, what I do is I go through the interview and I don't just send out just the raw interview the way that it is. I'll go through, and you can see there's a lot of cuts here, but that's mostly because I've gone through and pulled sound bites out for the video. But I'll go through and clean it up. So if there's a part where we stop and have to restart, I'll trim that out. If there's a big dead spot where they're waiting for a plane to fly overhead, cut that out. A lot of times there's just chatter off camera about this, that, or the other thing. Cut that out. You want it just to be questions and answers. And if there's an answer that goes bad at the end, I'll leave that whole answer in, including the part that say, oh, you know what, can we do that again? And then I'll start again. And the reason I do that is because sometimes there's some good information in the first part of that answer that we might want to use. The other reason I do all that trimming is because transcripts can be expensive. And you're paying by the minute generally. And so you want to get rid of anything that, I don't want to be billed for and waste time on just stuff that we know we're not going to use. Clients will thank you, and it will make your life a little bit easier once you start going through here. The two things I'll say about transcripts are everybody knows about the triangle. You get things either good, fast, cheap. Pick two. Right. Transcripts are the same way. If you decide to do transcripts, just know that there are services like rev.com that will do transcripts for like $1 a minute or $1.25 a minute if you want time stamped. I'll get back to that in a second. Or you can use professional transcription services, which are $2 to $4 a minute, depending upon how quickly you need them turned around. They will be much more accurate, I found, but they're more expensive. The timestamp feature in rev.com, if you want to go that way, is basically the running time of your sequence. It's not the actual, let me turn this off here. It's not these numbers, the actual time code from the camera. And so you have to be aware, if you put together a transcript based on the running time of this sequence, your interview sequence, then you can't adjust this at all because those times will all be off in your script. So I usually like to try to pay the extra and use the actual footage time code. That way, that never changes. But a lot of time clients want things super fast and they want it super cheap. Rev.com. So it's not an ad for them. That's just letting you know it's out there. So to build the rough assembly too, one thing I wanted to talk about, and for those of you who come to the Premiere Pro user groups, you've seen me talk about this so many times, but it is such a handy feature. It's what I like to call, or what somebody likes to call, they came up with the name, it's the pancake timeline. And what you do is you drag out one of your timelines here, and I'm going to drag out Melody here, and I'm going to drag it up right here so that it's on top of, so I have two timelines open. And what I can do now is I can go through, I can look at the script that I have and find, turn these off. I can find those sound bites that they want. Let's just come up to one that we know we used here. So for instance, this soundbite right here, I can just select, I can just drag it down onto my sequence, and boom. So that's how I'm going to build out this rough assembly. I'm going to have the script right here with the time codes. I'm just going to go down through the times, find the sound bites, pull them down, and just go. And I'll usually have all the interviews up on the top, and then I'll have the rough assembly timeline on the bottom, and I'll just drag down like that. The pancake timeline is an awesome thing for building out timelines. And you do the same. I do the same thing with B-roll. I'll have all 3 days of B-roll up there as I'm starting to put in B-roll, and I'll scrub through and I'll just drag stuff down, see how it looks, rearrange it, go back, drag some more stuff down. It works really, really well. And when you're all done with it, you just close it out, and boom, you're back to normal. So Tom, I don't know where you were, but I don't know if you had a question. Did you see how I did that? Moving the panels around? Yeah. So anyway, so that's that. So we build a rough assembly, we get it all done, and then client signs off on it. They say start putting in B-roll. So then boom, we're here. And this is the first cut of the video that I had B-roll in. Let's see my notes to make sure. So one thing that we talked about is, it's interesting, I get asked a lot about working with corporate stuff, how much input, creative input do I get as an editor? I actually get quite a bit. The client is in total control of the messaging. They have in-house screenwriters who actually write these scripts. But we do sit down and we talk about it. The producer that I worked with on this actually has a history of working in Hollywood. I've known him for a long time, and he and I kind of speak the same language in a lot of ways. And one thing that we talked about for this video was really trying to make it a bit like a movie, structure-wise. I don't know how many people are familiar with 3-act plot point structure for features. Some are. Who's not familiar with that? Okay, so for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the basic gist of it is, and I'm going to use a movie that everybody knows because it's real easy, Star Wars. We all know Star Wars, correct? Plot point 1 is when Luke's aunt and uncle die. That changed the story, that takes the story into Act 2, which then is Luke deciding to leave, because up to that point he doesn't want to go anywhere. Plot point 2 is when they escape from the Death Star. That then propels the story into the final act. And we talked about, and if you break down most movies, you know, they all kind of adhere to that structure, unless you're like Pulp Fiction or, you know, some weird avant-garde foreign films. They all kind of adhere to that two plot point structure. So we did that with this, if you notice. So the film kind of, the story kind of goes up. You don't really know. We decided purposely to hold off the reveal and build up to the mom saying, you know, my child had Down syndrome. Boom, that's sort of plot point 1. And then we see the child. That was by design. Story goes along, you know, it kind of gets to a point where, you know, we're never gonna have any fun again. We're not, you know, life is just gonna be bad. We didn't want the video to be a downer at all. We wanted this to be an uplifting story. So again, let's build up to a point where things are really bad, but we're not gonna let that stop us. We're gonna go out. And then they go on hiking, we end on the high note. That was sort of plot point 2. That was kind of our structure. And so we thought about it in those terms, like let's try to think of this as a little mini movie, a little mini story documentary here. So we worked on that. You know, the client gives me, they give me notes on things that they'd like to see in B-roll, but for the most part, it's up to me to sort of build out the B-roll in between all the different segments. They kind of, you know, we talk about it ahead of time once we get the footage, because before we go out, we're not sure what we're gonna get. But once we get back and we do a debrief, the client sits down with me and goes, okay, we got this stuff in the house that we like, it's pretty good, you should look at this, find these moments. We got this stuff out on the trail, you might find, I think we got a shot like this. You know, we kind of go over all that, and I take a lot of notes. And then I take that script back to my office, that first script, and then I go, like I said, I go through all the B-roll, and I actually write down notes as I'm going through the B-roll. This shot would be perfect for this moment, this shot would be perfect for this moment, you know, sort of watch it and make notes, and so that when I finally sit down to start doing this B-roll, I kind of almost have an outline of where I want to go with things. So we start putting in the B-roll. The first thing I found that I liked was this moment, you know, again, not wanting to reveal the daughter until that moment, you know, having this little interaction with the kids in the kitchen and the family, I thought was really nice. There's one moment, and I'm going to go to the final version here. I don't know, we still don't have audio? I tried to plug.
You sure you got the mixer turned up? What channel?
Yeah, you had computer chimes a minute ago. So you've got audio coming out. Something or something.
There we go. Oh, you know what it might be? There we go. Okay, so this little interaction, I just kind of wanted to show this.
Yes.
That little interaction, so who has siblings? Okay, I have a younger brother. That conversation is exactly what my brother and I would do. And when I was going through and I saw that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I love that little moment, because it is such a family moment. If you have a sibling, you know, did you wash your hands? Yes. Okay, good. You know, it's so awesome. But I looked at that and thought, okay, I want to get the viewer right away. I want to pull them into this family and show them this is just like any other family. They have the same, you know, they're the same as everybody. And that little moment I thought worked perfect to sort of introduce, you know, the kids, the family, and then seeing them prepare, they're all together.
So we've been married for 10 years and had 2 boys, and then my daughter from a previous marriage, and just had a fun little oops pregnancy at 40. We weren't.
And we never see, you know, their daughter at this point. They actually have an older daughter who wasn't there for this meal, and so I felt kind of bad that we didn't really see her until the very end. But you missed the meal, you missed the cut. So, but what's interesting is, you'll notice. So again, we shot everything in 4K. So I had to do a little bit of reframing here. If you look right over here, you can see the daughter's feet. So I had to kind of push in a little bit to get, and I didn't want to go too far to cut the mom out. So. But the shot's so quick that you don't really notice
Pregnancy at 40, we weren't planning on it. I needed.
And you're noticing.
Now it's ruined, we know it's.
Yeah, now, that's all you see. But up until that point, because there's all this action over on this side of the frame, that's where your eye is going to go. So I figured we're okay, to have that over there.
Did you add the movement in post, or was that?
No, so part of the way we shot it was just sort of handheld. We wanted to have that, kind of cinema verite look to it. We didn't want it to be on sticks. Not much. I think outside of the interviews, I don't know that much of this video was shot on sticks.
Could have moved the data just what?
Yeah, well, I wasn't there that day, so. So, that's that. So again, we, working to keep the reveal, build up to that moment. One thing I want to talk to you about that moment is the shot selection for that. So we have the mom talk about it, and up until this point, we've seen the dad, but we haven't really heard from him. And being a dad of a daughter, it was real important for me to okay, I want to make sure that we have the dad commenting about this. We felt it was important. But to introduce him, I wanted to kind of see him interacting with the daughter, and it sort of worked out that the reveal would happen at the same time. So if you watch that sequence again.
And even though I'm a nurse, my head was kind of spinning, but then I said, okay, so remind me which one that one is again, and he's like, it's Down syndrome. You want to go get the ball?
Getting past that initial hurdle of, okay, well, your child is going to be different. Just getting past that news is, I think, just a huge step in the right direction, because you take the time you need to process it. And then we got to the point where.
So that sequence, I went through a number of different edits on that, but I like the fact that we see her, we see him together as he starts to talk about her, and these shots were, you can't plan these shots, but kudos to Chris, my cinematographer, for grabbing them. These shots, I think, are some of the, for me as a dad of a daughter, young daughter, it's like the most heartwarming thing. It's just the two of them. It's like you're sitting outside watching them.
That news is, I think,
together.
just a huge step in
in
the right direction, because you take the time you need to process it.
He's going to carry her. He's going to be there for her, even though he's talking about, not knowing what the future is. This isn't. You kind of get the sense this isn't what he had planned, but he's going to be there. This is his daughter, and he's going to love her. And just having that little interaction, to me, again, finding the emotion through the B-roll, letting the visuals tell the story. Is key to this sequence working.
And then we got to the point where, okay, now we're accepting that this is going to happen. What can we do to prepare?
I tried to do the same thing later in the video where we talked about where we showed the mom caring for her daughter. I think it's down around here. This sequence too. This sequence went through. It was a lot longer. It was a lot shorter at one point, and it was trying to find the balance to sort of. Where they're talking about raising the daughter and the challenges that
the child came out, she was prepared mentally and was able to just hold her little daughter and love her from the get-go.
Sorry. When I found out that I was having a child with Down syndrome, I did think how this would affect my family.
So yeah, that little sequence, caring for her, we had a lot of different angles and a lot of different shots to choose from. But trying to keep it in the time frame, trying to find just it's literally 4 shots that sort of show her caring for her and having just a tender moment with her daughter, much like the tender moment with the dad earlier.
And love her.
I'd like to tell you that there's some sort of science to that as an editor, but there's not. You feel your way through that. You drop shots in there, you rearrange them, you shorten them, you lengthen them. Sometimes that 4 shots now sort of looks like, oh, wow, yeah, of course that's the way you'd cut it together, But that literally took, 3 or 4 hours sometimes. It's like, what shot works? How do you, this one works here, but then this, so give yourself lots of time. Don't be afraid to experiment. Do not rush. One rule that I live by when it comes to editing is the minute I start just going, okay, you know what, yeah, that works, let's keep moving on. That's when I'm done for the day. Because I'm sort of emotionally disengaged from the project at that point, and I'm not in tune with it. And I think to really, find those moments to really build that emotion, and you need to be at one with your video. It sounds really weird to have me say that. But you really do. You have to sort of be in this groove with the video and as you're editing and feeling it as you're going, and it just needs to feel right. And the minute you just start going, yeah, that works, I think that looks good, boom. Call it quits, because it's not going to look good. And I guarantee you that your client or the director, whoever you're working for, is going to call you back, and that'll probably be the first sequence they point to, that one you just sort of put together super quick. One thing I want to talk about is music, too. So I'm a big believer, I edit with music on, which a lot of people don't do. I'm always kind of surprised when I tell other editors that I do that, because they tell me, oh, how do you do that? And that's real easy. I turn the iPod on, I turn the speakers on, and the music comes out. It's real simple. So I don't use, music is usually always the last thing that I drop in. And whatever project I'm working on, I find music that helps me get in the mood for that project. So if I'm cutting something kind of upbeat or, with a lot of fast cuts and things like that, I'll put on a band that I like. If it's something like this, it's going to be classical music, which I'm a huge fan of. And I'm man enough to admit it, I throw on some Enya every now and then. And I'll cut with that. And that rhythm from that music, if it's classical music, I just don't throw on any classical music. I'll know what symphony I want to listen to, I'll know what artist I want to play based, again, on the type of project I'm working on. I'll be real specific about that. And that puts me in a mood and, again, building a creative space and environment for me to cut in. And somebody asked me recently if that ruins my rhythms for cutting. And I go, you know what? Say what? It does give me rhythm. And it helps me find that. But another thing, too, that I generally don't cut on music beats. I know a lot of people do. One thing that I do is I cut on, and especially in a piece like this where it's somebody talking, I cut on the voice. When there's a change in the voice. So somebody's talking, and then they change, I cut. If you watch this sequence right here, you can see it kind of happen.
Because she was advanced maternal age, and we offered her all the options, and she opted for the NIPT.
The NIPT is non-invasive prenatal testing, and it's just a blood test. That's what was very appealing to me, is that it's something.
So you can kind of notice when there's changes in the voice is when I cut on the B-roll. So it's,
The NIPT is non-invasive prenatal testing, and it's just a blood test. That's what was very appealing to me, is that it's something very simple. I felt I would be perfect.
So yeah, the voice is where I'm getting my rhythm from, her voiceover. Because, listen, I think music is awesome. And I'm a big believer in movie music and having the music to build emotion there. But in a video like this, I want the music to just be carrying the story along and to sort of be an undercurrent of the emotion. Now there is going to be a time where I do want that music to rise up. But for pieces like this, I really feel that it just needs to be there to sort of give you a little bit of, an undergirding to kind of help move the story along. Now, that's not true in every case. If you are doing a scene like this, okay, you have no words there. The images are telling everything, and you have John Williams' score behind you. Yes, go to the music, because the music is, okay? Because it's all about the music here. The music and Luke Skywalker's face there and that whole scene, that's all telling the story. And yes, so then you want to emphasize more of the music. But for something like this, I don't want the music to get in the way. That's just sort of how I feel. So I want tracks that sort of sit underneath, that sort of just move the story along. But eventually, when we get to the end, and she's talking about, let's go back to this version here with the nice color-corrected one. And she starts talking about, what they're going to be doing. If you notice, that's the one point where I kind of felt like the music needs to rise up. We really need to notice the music.
Child in a wheelchair there. It just really got me thinking, they're going out and they're having fun and they have a child in a wheelchair, so why can't we?
So then the music kind of comes up. Then it gets a little bit more triumphant. That, again, that's when you want that there, because we're going into seeing them, having this life and hearing that. And so I want the music to stand out. The rest of the time, I want the music to just sit underneath there. Let's see. So what else we talk about here?
How do you feel about finding the right music for it?
Oh, that is a struggle. I ain't gonna lie to you. So I have music services that I use. I get music from a company called DeWolf in New York. I have a licensing agreement with them. Another place out of England called Cinephonics. What I'll do, it depends. So a lot of times I'll search through their catalogs and find stuff. I have agreements with both of them. Part of the deal of having the blanket license is that I can send them a cut of the video and say, okay, here's the video I'm working on. Here's some sample songs from other videos, send them some YouTube links of tracks that I like. Help me out here. They know their catalogs better than I do. And they will go through and build playlists for me that I can then go in and sample music from. If I have to do it on my own, and maybe that's one reason why music is always last for me. It's the thing I hate the most. You can sit there for hours listening to track after track after track. I mean, how many people have been there? Yeah. And it's like, no, and so it's having that service really helps me narrow it down. But even then, I still end up sometimes, they'll send me playlists. I'll listen to all of them and say, no, that's not right, and I'll just go searching on my own for it. But yeah, I usually just get it from a service. I would love to be able to have stuff custom scored, but most of the time, the problems with that are budget. We're pretty tight on budget most of the time. The other thing too is the edit changes. Mike Town, I like to talk about how there's no picture lock in corporate video. You'll finish a video, and then literally the day they're going to run it or send it out online, there'll be that one section. Somebody called in at midnight last night. We need to cut that. Wait, what? Everything's timed out. We're color graded. We're locked. Yeah, no, we got to cut that. So having a custom score, that would just wreck everything. So yeah, I try to avoid it unless in certain projects would do that for. It would be like, okay, we have to go into it knowing that and whatever. So any other questions, by the way, before I kind of keep going? Okay. Wow. Okay.
What was the budget?
A lot. I don't know if I feel comfortable saying it, but let's just say it was more than 10,000. So.
More than 50?
No, more than 50.
Yeah, I haven't worked with raw files yet. Did you run these on proxies?
Yes. Somehow I missed that off my notes. Yes, we did proxies. If you look over here in the bin, you can see that we've got attached proxies here. Something I will say about the C200 that's really awesome is it actually creates its own proxy files. So what we ended up doing was we were just able to connect to all of those. I didn't have to make any proxies. However, there was a glitch with that, and I'm actually glad you brought that up. Here is one little tech thing for all of you Premiere editors who work with proxies. The C200, the way Premiere normally works with proxies is it looks for a file name that matches, or a file name that has the proxy extension to it. The C200 doesn't create that. So what I ended up having to do is go to attach proxies here. You can see, you can see down here where match file properties. You've got file name, media start, file extension, tape name. Tape name. This is tape. Anyway, so the file name thing wasn't working. It was actually what I was having to go through and connect them one at a time because it wasn't seeing that. And I had a lot of shots here, and that was not going to work. So then I saw media start, and I called Chris, my DP, and I said, hey, the proxies have the same time code as the media, correct? As the raw clips. Yes. Boom. Switch over to media start, connect to the first one, it connected all of them right away. So that can be a handy thing. But yes, using the raw workflow, the clips look amazing. They graded really, really well, but you can see here, if I turn off the proxies, so that's what it looks like, just raw. And if I turn off, we had a kind of a simple LUT to it. But you can see even playing back Thunderbolt 3 off of this drive, it's not gonna
fun as a family again. We're never gonna be.
So yeah, there's some pretty hefty files there. I could probably reduce the resolution down, and that might smooth it out, but
be able to go anywhere. We went on this,
but not much. So yeah, going proxy workflow is the best way to go in this particular instance. I can't see who asked me that question because I have this huge blinding light, but I'm assuming you were over from that area. That's why I'm looking over there.
It was actually raw, it wasn't just log footage.
It was raw, yeah. Which my color grader was very happy about. So.
Oh, you don't do that.
So Yeah, I didn't. And since I'm short on time, I'll kind of skip down here. So let me see if there's anything else I wanted to come to. We talked about that. We talked about that. So 2 quick things. Yes, I didn't do that for this one. Depending upon the project, a lot of times I will do the color on it.
And when is color in the scope of your work?
Very end. Very end. So after we are completely done, if I have budget and I have time, that's the other factor, I will send out to a colorist. And there's a colorist that I use. He lives in Portland. He works out of Hollywood. He works on a number of shows and done documentaries and things like that. Super nice guy, an amazing colorist. I mean, if you look at the shots, like, okay, so that's that, and then the finish, well, here, like, actually, probably this would be the better way to look at it. So yeah, I would just like take this shot right here. Let's come back a little bit, like that shot, and then if I turn it off, you know, that's the ungraded, and you could probably see my kind of crappy LUT version that I kind of did. But I mean, he really did a really good job at bringing everything out. But yeah, that actually is something that I was going to talk about. Is if you're going to do that, you need to sort of know that ahead of time, and talk to whoever's going to grade it, because so all the grading was done in Resolve. And the workflow between Premiere and Resolve isn't always that harmonious. We did have some issues. So you can see this timeline right here is actually what I sent him. I've compressed all the audio down. So I create a whole new sequence just for the color grade. I compress all the audio down because, let's face it, he's color grading. He can care less about the audio. I do 2 tracks, one for video, or one for the interviews, and one for B-roll. And then I'll export out an XML and then send that to him. I'll also send him the entire project with all the footage and everything. So this project's about 2.5 terabytes worth of data. Yeah, raw is awesome.
So it takes what upload?
So I sent this to him. The issue that we had was, so this is all shot 4K, edited in a 1080 timeline. We brought it into Resolve. Resolve, because the effects controls saw everything at 50%, it translated all of the clips down 50%. So it was 1080, but all the clips were 50% from being resized. So Brian had to sort of go in and adjust all of them. So what I send him, though, I send him the project, this timeline as an XML to open up in Resolve. I also send him because I'm on Windows, I can't export out ProRes. Thanks, Apple. But I like Cineform better. I think it's better. So I send him, I like Cineform better, but that is another option. But I'll send him a Cineform file of this video that he can use for reference if he has any issues with particular shots. The quality is I send it the highest quality it puts out, and I also send him an H.264 reference file. So he always has that to sort of go back and look at as he's grading if he has any issues.
How do you send it to him?
I put it all on a hard drive in FedEx. And then he does all of his magic and then sends me the drive back. He will actually upload the review files, though, to me via Dropbox. So I'll look at them and I'll call him up and say, this looks really good. The part here, can we make it a little bit warmer, a little bit cooler, whatever? And then he'll go back in and tweak it and then send me that. So, but yeah, it's all done through shipping hard drives. The last thing I'll talk about, since we're running low on time here, is one thing that I'm starting to do. 2 things I'm starting to do more is, especially with this client, we're trying to push away from seeing people on camera. There's nothing more boring than a talking head. Yes, whoever said, yeah, you feel me. So, listen, you do want to see your subjects at some point. It's just a given. You have to see them. But as much as you possibly can, we're trying to cover with B-roll. So less
is more.
Yes, seeing the story, seeing the people in their lives is much more engaging than just seeing somebody sitting in a kitchen and talking. Now, the shot of the dad getting emotional, yeah, I'm not going to cut away to that. I mean, dude, he's crying. That's gold right there,
When do you punch in?
So punching in, usually I will punch in. It depends. Again, you have to feel it with what they're saying. A lot of times, punch-ins are dictated by where we have to make a cut in their voiceover. So, this point right here, if we can play it back there.
My head was kind of spinning, but then I said,
there was some more stuff she said in there, and I cut that out, and then match cut it together. But that's where I would punch in. So yeah, so everything, this is, you can see, again, we shot 4K, so this is at 90%. and this clip is at 50%. So that's the nice thing. We shot everything with one camera, so it was crucial that we get it in 4K. And I will tell you this from experience, if you have a cameraman going out to do this and your plan is to punch in, make sure that when your cameraman is there that he zooms in and he is sharp on focus. Because I've had footage come back that when it's like this, it looks awesome. When it's like this, it's soft. You're just a little out of focus. And it completely ruins your footage then. You have to either go in and use an effect, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't.
It only happens on the important shots.
It only happens on the important shots. So that's one thing we're really trying to do. The other thing that I'm really trying to do more of now too, which maybe to a lot of editors is like, well, yeah, duh, but it doesn't seem to happen in every video, and for a long time I didn't do it. I don't know, probably most people in this room don't know Rich Ford. Rich Ford is an editor who used to live here in town. He's a good friend of mine. He's done a lot of documentaries. I was showing him a video I cut years ago, another corporate piece, and he's watching it, and whenever we would cut to the B-roll, it would just be music. And he goes, well, where's the sound? I go, well, what do you mean there was a sound? Who cares about what's happening in this lab or what's happening here, whatever? It's, just hear the music. And he goes, I want to hear that. And so it really made me rethink what I was doing. And now we tell the audio guy when we go out, record everything. Everybody has a mic. Yeah, Everybody has a mic, and I want everybody lobbed, I want a boom, I want ambient sounds, whatever. And you can hear, every time we see B-roll now, we have nat sound underneath it. And it just adds a whole other layer, even if you have to go in and augment it. So for instance, when we cut to the clinic shot, hearing the wind noise. That wind noise could have come from anywhere. It came from that particular shot, but you could go find that anywhere. But laying in those kind of sounds, laying in traffic, laying in office sounds, whatever, put that in. It adds to the realism. Again, you're pulling the viewer in. Audio is so crucial. Listen, I suck at audio. I'll be the first to admit. If those of you in the user group know, I complain about how bad I am at audio all the time. But I know enough to be able to lay in some sound effects, lay in some ambient sounds to really, fill that out and make that world much more complete. Kevin?
Are you using...
So for this particular project, no, I don't. I use Prelude heavily. So there's a project I do every year for a company here in town where we go to CES and we shoot all day. I was just talking about this with somebody here, I think Mark Mason somewhere. But what we do is we'll capture, we'll shoot all day, come back to the hotel room, put the card in, open up Prelude, ingest all the footage, and then meta tag the crap out of it with everything. So when we're going into edit, I can go into this search window and type in, whatever phone or whatever gadget the name is, and boom, all those clips come up.
Well, it's all fresh in your head.
Yeah, we do it that night. Yeah. So, and we do it with the client too there. So they give us some, because we don't always know what it is we're shooting, and they'll tell us. But yeah, so for that type of project, we do. But for this type of thing, I don't, metadata doesn't really serve me. I can see how it could for like what Mike was doing. It would be kind of nice, but I kind of have.
The story's kind of,
Yeah. The story's in my head, and I'm going to be going off a script that they're giving me, and so I'm kind of at the mercy of whatever sound bites they want to have.
When do you know it's done?
When the client says it's done.
When the check clears?
It's real easy to know with this type of thing when it's done. If you're working on a personal project, that's another story. Projects aren't finished; they're abandoned. But with this kind of thing, it's when the client says we're good. And listen, I will be honest, there was a project we did before this where I wasn't entirely happy with the last edit. I had the client, we went back and forth about a lot of different things, and the client's really good, and he, like I said, he gives me a lot of creativity, and I actually put together an entire edit on my own, and I told him, look, I think and we were struggling with somebody else at the company who had a different vision for the video than what we were trying to make. And so he was trying to please them, and I said, look, I think this is just tearing the video in a different direction. It's not as heartfelt anymore. And he goes, I agree, but you got to go with the corporate forces. There's the politics involved. So I went, on my own. I spent a full day putting together my own cut. And I said, because he kind of said, well, how would you see it done? And so I went and did my own thing and showed it to him. He goes, this is good. He goes, but it didn't make it. The political person said, yeah, no, we want to go this way. So one for the, what is it? One for the reel, one for the meal? Yeah.
We probably have time for about one more question and a closing point from Eric.
Quick, keep them quick, come on.
What was your total time frame from start to get it to?
This was actually really, really fast. I'm going to say it was about 2 months from when we first met about it to when we wrapped, and it was accelerated. We normally take about 3-4 months to do these things, but the client had a deadline. They said, we want to show this at a company meeting on this date, and that date was about 2 months, and so we're like, go.
It was just for that meeting, that's it?
Well, no, it will live ultimately on their website. However, there is a lot of politics involved in this topic. The reason it's not streaming is because the company hasn't made it public yet, and they are trying to find a very delicate way to get this video out because of the nature of it. There are a lot of people who would take the video the wrong way, and it could cause waves. Why that wasn't thought about ahead of time, I don't know. But either way, I got to tell a really, I thought, heartfelt, engaging story, and so I'm glad I got to do it. Real quick.
Comment on this edit. Can you show the first time you see Dad?
Yes.
Because this is the most beautiful edit in this whole piece.
Right here.
So remind me which one that one is again, and he's like, it's Down syndrome. You want to go get the ball?
Getting past that initial hurdle of, okay, well, your child is going to be different. Just getting past that news.
That is the most beautiful edit in this piece because it wasn't cut. Because it sat there and held on Dad to the point where you're almost uncomfortable. So think of that when you're editing. The music reference I would give you is silence is music too. Right? Let those moments happen.
All right, well, with that, I got nothing else.
Thank you, Eric. Awesome job. Looks like we've got some raffle opportunities here. Who has tickets? Who did not get a ticket? Raise your hand.
By the way, quick question. Who recognizes what my desktop is? Is anybody in this room? This is bonus points. What? Nice.
Yeah.
It's the time map.
Looking for that one, it never comes up.
One of my all